Oh, 好，大家好. So hello everyone, and hi John. So today I'm going to talk about silk strings, and basically this is my second time speaking about talking about silk strings in the New York Chin Society, and well, actually the first time I speak about silk strings was 10 years ago. It was the 2013. That was in John's house. In New York Chin Society, and I still remember that we invited the pipa player Zhou Yi, and she was playing on my Suxin Silk pipa strings actually. So 10 years has passed, and from 2013 to now, and I'm still making chin. No, I'm still making silk strings, but very slowly actually, because of the COVID things. And so today, I guess I will just speak through several stories and to talk about something about silk strings and also the chins that can be put on silk strings. So this is our product. The screen shows the transparent silk strings made by us. This is about 2014. I remember that I first learned Guqin in 2004, the spring of 2004. So after 2 years, I got to know the silk strings because I listened to the old 8 discs. I guess everyone here knows that old 8 discs. And that was recorded by a team led by Zha Fuxi in 1956. In 1956, Zha Fuxi led this team to travel to all around China, and that team contains 2 people. That's Wang Di and Zha Fuxi. They recorded the old recordings of the chin players in China. And basically, well, it's not basically, all the recordings are recorded on silk strings. Actually, I love the texture of that recording, and I also love the interpretation of the chin players in that recordings. I think 2 or 3 years ago, that the whole set of recordings of that 1956 version was released, which is quite expensive, I guess. It's about $200 for a set of CDs released about 2 or 3 years ago, and that was the whole album. And well, by that time, I fell in love with the sound of the silk strings, and I want to buy a set. But actually, I got to know Mr. Jim Binkley, and who lives in Portland, Oregon, and he wanted me to also buy 5 sets for him of the Jinyu Sixian, and I want to buy 1 set. So then I contacted Mr. Wang Duo, who is in Suzhou. Wang Duo is a very famous chin player in Suzhou actually, and Wang Duo. So I placed the order online, and I can. So I placed the order online, and actually Wang Duo called me. Well, in a call, it seems that he was quite excited that, and he told me that he will give me his newly released DVD and also his books of the Woman Qinyun to me. So so I get a set. So I get 6 sets and send 5 sets to Jim Binkley, and then I started my silk string journey actually. So I immediately fall in love with the silk string sound. Well, I mean, I was totally immersed by this silk string sound actually. So well, at that time I was playing Olu Wang Ji. Olu Wang Ji is so we all know that piece. It's a traditional song. It's a very Qing style piece of the Guqin piece. So I started playing time over time. So one of the reasons that I play over the time over time is that well, at that time, is hard for me to remember, to memorize. It's not to remember, to memorize actually. So I played over and over again for several months. Well, the strings got so when the strings got loosened, I will have to restrum it over and over again. But I still loved it. But until one day, so one of my friends who is actually a painter, a designer, and he has very good taste, and he came to visit me, and I showed my strings to him, and I told him that this is the strings, this is the kind of strings they play in the old recordings. But surprisingly, after I played the silk strings, and he told me that he think that judging from the sound I play from the chin, he said it seems like I'm dying. So I was really surprised that he's saying that I'm dying. So but his taste is good. So I kind of think over and over again about so how's that sound I played, and then I realized several facts about my situation with the silk string at that time. Well, at that time, I couldn't play the other pieces, which means that I could not learn new pieces by that string. For example, the flowing water. For example, the flowing water. The flowing water is a major. Well, I consider the flowing water as a large music piece of the Guqin, and the first three notes is dong dong dong, the C, C, and C, which means that it's a strong sound which represents something like the water sound, like the deep water sound, dong dong dong. And if I play that on the 金云丝弦 on my chin at that time, the first string doesn't function actually, because I can only hear a very small sound from the first string, only scratching sound if I make other playing on a string. So which means that if I play other big music pieces on that string, it's the flavor did not satisfy me. And so this is the first reason. And the second reason is that I have to restrum it all the time over time. But I have to move on to learn new pieces. So so this is so then I switched back to metal nylon strings. I think that happens in 2005. So after so many years, then I met Miss Suxin, and surprisingly, I found out that her string is really good. But that was the very draft edition. I mean, I think that's probably at 2010. Yeah. Well, at that time, Suxin was just making by herself in her home, actually, by very simple method. So the reason I talk about this is that so later on during my experience in the making the strings, I like to talk a little bit about how the strings were made, because the type of strings, well, except the Japanese strings, well, except my strings, all the other strings are actually based on industrially made silk strings, which means that they buy the basic material. The basic material is not silk. The basic material is was a very rough silk string. So let me show you on my. So this is the. So this is the material I'm talking about. Was very how to say that, inexpensive, and you can just directly buy it from the Taobao. Taobao is the eBay of China, and you can buy it just about well, actually it's about $1 for 1 meter of the silk string. well, some people call it the raw silk string, but actually some silk string makers just buy this kind of string and wrap it well into the first 4 strings, and then the whole set came out. And some more serious silk string maker will put this kind of raw silk string into the fish glue or hide glue or other kinds of glues, and to boil it and then stretch it, and then it becomes the finished set. So this is the industrially made silk string. And well, actually the Guqin丝弦dates back in the time of 1960s, where Zhang Fuxi also when Zhang Fuxi tried to revive the silk string making, because in some books I read the material that in the 1940s in mainland China, the old silk string making was gone. So Zhang Fuxi tried to revive it, and then he found out this factory in Suzhou. So a new method was made to make the silk strings from the industrially made raw silk strings. And then, in Hangzhou, I visited Miss Chen Xicheng. Chen Xicheng used to be a very famous qin player, and she was a student of Guqin Hu. She plays very nicely, actually. Well, I think in China, players like Chen Xicheng does not exist anymore. I mean, the style of in a complete style of the Guqin Hu. The other player I can think of is Mr. Zhou Minzhong. Zhou Minzhong plays very much like Guqin Hu, but Chen Xicheng is another one. So when I visited Chen Xicheng to ask to see her old strings, she first pulled out a Song Dynasty qin, which is really good. But that Song Dynasty qin was strung by metal nylon strings. That metal nylon strings was the first 2 strings are green color, which means that the copper inside is rusted, but it works fine. It lasts for about 30 years right now, actually. And then she showed me her very old set, probably the first few sets from the Guqin丝弦. That was in the 80s, and she told me the price of the silk string was about 20 yuan. 20 yuan. Well, at that time in the 80s, 20 yuan is actually one guy's salary for a whole month. Well, I checked the quality of that string. Well, it's very similar with the current industrially made silk string, but slightly better, actually. Okay, so when I say industrially made, well, I mean labor intensive, just like these kind of works, which means that these kind of strings were made massively. For one day, these kind of strings can made for several miles, and these strings can actually was actually put in use in the erhu to tie the strings to the wooden discs. The legendary erhu player called Abi in China, he used to play on the silk strings, but actually most of the time the silk string on the erhu was used to tie the strings, not to play it. And and also I visited a factory in Beijing. I mean, it's a violin making factory. they used the silk strings to tie the bags. The bags was used to hold several violins, which means that the silk string was used to tie the bags. Functions as a rope. So why? So what is it function as a rope? It's this is something what I like to talk about today. It's because historically silk string functions as a strong fiber. Stronger than any other biofiber. That was before the nylon was invented. So this is a little. So this is the information of the historically silk strings, and in the Song Dynasty. So let me talk about the French professor. I visit the French professor was actually a friend of New York Chin Society also. I visited him in Paris, and he told me about the old silk strings, and he said that in his childhood, the rope of the parachute are actually silk. He said everything was silk, which means that the strong fiber was silk. And also in the Ming Dynasty book, in a very famous Ming Dynasty book, which is called Tiangong Kaiwu. Tiangong Kaiwu literally, I think maybe referred as heavenly workers, how heavenly workers work, or something like that. It's just like an illustration of the industry in China, in Ming Dynasty China. In that book, there's a description of a specific silk. That silk is actually called Jican. It's a kind of breed of the silk. It said Jican can be used on bowstrings. Actually, my Suxin strings, the fourth strings, can be used as bowstring also. Which can hold about 40 to 50 pounds. On a composite bow, and also the silk can be used as the rope for wagon. And I can find the same description on. In Europe, in the 13th century, the Italians they used to use the silk as the rope for wagons. Horse wagons. So so silk is a very strong fiber. So this is how it was used in ancient times. And here's a little so this graph was actually made 10 years ago when I was making lots of talks in China. So I made this graph and I read a lot of references from several books. And for example, China was the earliest country to put cocoons into labor, to use the silk strings. And then Italy, Spain, and France. In this graph, actually, I like to talk about something about Italy, because I think Italy is the biggest, used to be the biggest sericulture country in Europe, and they have a kind of string is called catgut. I find that word in many guitar books, actually, catgut, C-A-T-G-U-T, catgut, and on internet, and also asked ChatGPT about this catgut, and in Google, many references said different things about catgut, because catgut, some books said the catgut is actually the other animal's gut strings, and some books said the catgut is actually silk, and some books said catgut is either gut or silk, which means that it doesn't matter because they're all biological materials. But actually, I got to know this guy who's from Portland, Oregon, and he's a representative of the Aquila Strings. It's an Italian gut string seller, dealer. He told me about the gut. He suspect that. He told me the story of the catgut. He said that the catgut is actually a fake. How to say that? Well, fake saying of the silk string. Well, because in Italy, well, at that time, to kill a cat will bring very bad luck. It was very misfortune. So the silk string maker in Italy, they do not want other competitors to make the silk strings, so they fake it, and they told the others they kill the cat and make the cat gut into the strings, and no, because they found out that they can make superior strings or a new kind of strings using silk. So this is his idea. So this is his saying about catgut. Well, talking about gut, I'd also like to talk about the other materials. I mean, the other animals' gut, because in China, the western part of China use gut strings very much. For example, Xinjiang part, they use the catgut, and also in Hangzhou in the olden times, they use gut very much. In Tang Dynasty, there's a poem in Tang Dynasty. In that poem, it says there's a pipa made for Yang Guifei. They use 露水蚕丝. 露水蚕丝 is a very special breed of the silk strings. No. Well, it's not silk string. 露水蚕丝. And there's another kind of pipa for Yang Guifei. It's made from the gut from a chicken, so it's chicken gut. But that chicken is called kunji. It's not normal chicken. And I looked up the kunji on website, and it says it's a very, how to say that, it's a very expensive breed of chicken which does not exist anymore today, which means that expensive chicken's gut to make the strings on pipa, and they use the iron plug to plug the pipa. Okay, so this is a little. So this is something about the old silk strings, and also I found a German-made string in and also important Oregon actually, and so this is this is a similar product. So this is made in Ohio, music company. It says keep your string in this envelope, so it has its properties for preserving the strings. And also I found one violin E silk strings made in Germany. Well, on that package it says it prevents moisture. It's the string does not change. It does not change when there's a temperature change, when there's a moisture change, or anything. It says it's very strong. Well, actually, this silk string was very perfect. Actually, it's transparent color and very smooth, way smoother than any other strings I found on the market. But that company does not exist anymore. And there was a price list for the old violin E strings in 1920s, and those company does not exist now. And this is the pipa strings by Marusan Hashimoto. Well, it's on eBay. Well, right now it's a very common thing. Well, because Marusan Hashimoto, I mean, his business in China keep expanding actually, and they have orange color, and well, when I was in the States, I met David Badagnani. He later sent me a set of strings from, say that, Burmese, I think, from Burma, and that set of silk strings was actually used on Burmese erhu. It was orange color. So when I see that string, it is the same kind of quality with the industrially made strings in Suzhou. Okay, and so in my topic, I said why the historical evidence of the silk strings. So, well, I also find some very interesting strings in China. That was, but I just could not find a picture. That was by one of my customers. He found one very crystal clear silk string, very clear, just like nylon strings. He said that string is from the 60s actually, and that was on the silk string. That was on the 四胡. 四胡means that the fourth string erhu. 四胡was a royal musical instrument. And well, actually, I can find more photos in my laptops, but right now I cannot find more. So, so then I'd like to talk about the aesthetic change of which I observed about silk strings. Well, I think the strings affect very much on the playing style on the chin. I mean, for an extreme example, I'd like to say something about Mr. Mukafushimi, the Fushimi song. The Fushimi song is actually a Fushimi song from Tokyo. And well, because I think the style of the Wang Duo, I mean, and also Wang Duo and some Hong Kong players, Taiwan chin players, I think their playing style is similar to Fushimi song, and this is all because of the texture of the silk strings. I mean, the strings, the industrially made silk strings has weak sound, which means that the strings, the tension of the strings are weak, and their surface was not smooth. But in Japanese culture, I think it's very similar to the wabi-sabi style. So I paste this photo in here. So this is wabi-sabi feeling. Is the contemporary wabi-sabi feeling. So the traditional Japanese silk string is very similar to industrially made silk strings in China. They use that on their shamisen. Their shamisen has very distinctive characters of the string. The sound, I mean, the yun, how to say yun, is the delay of the silk is very short, which means that, well, if you pluck a string, the sound will disappear in 2 or 3 seconds.
It decays fast.
What?
The sound, it decays very fast.
Decays, right, exactly. The sound decays very fast, and then the texture is the texture was not soft. Well, if you use a pluck to pluck that kind of silk string, it can dramatically increase the effects of that string. But when the strings were put in Guqin, I think the new kind of style of playing happens. And also when Mr. Wang Duo play on those Taoism pieces, the first 2 strings in on the Guqin, I think that does not function does not function anymore. Very limited scratching sound comes from the guqin, and the total feeling of that sound is very, very different from the traditional old 8 discs. So this is the major difference from those silk strings and my silk strings. There's a typical example of the Pu Xue Zhai's Mei Hua San Nong. That recording is about 100 years ago, and he used a very good quality set of silk strings, and that set is very much like metal nylon strings. Well, I mean the tension, and also, well, if you listen closely to the old 8 discs, the pitch is around the standard pitch. Well, considering the facet, considering the distortion of the old recordings, the pitch can be actually above the pitch of the 7th string can be above C and below D, which is still very, very higher than the silk string, than the industrially made string music pieces. For example, played by Wang Duo, he would usually will adjust the 7th string to A, which is dramatically lower than the D. Once I had a project to measure about 20 to 30 music pieces pitch in the old 8 discs recording, and they are all above B, and they're all the 7th string is all above C and below D, so it's very high, which means that, well, at that time the silk string they made was of very high quality. So I think I like to talk a little bit about the metal nylon strings. In China, there's a famous player, it's called Wu Na. Wu Na is famous for playing the metal nylon strings, I think. So the way she played the metal nylon strings, the tempo is very different from other people, because she would stretches on the tempo. Well, I think the reason is that the metal nylon strings decays very slowly, so she has to adjust the tempo of that music piece of the guqin. So it's similar to the silk strings. So I think that's my opinion on the aesthetic change on the silk string, silk strings effect on the music style change. Well, I guess this is all for today's my talk about silk strings. And all right, thank you.
Thank you, Wang Geng. I have a question. Is the modern-made silk string no longer as good as ancient-made? 就是现代做的丝弦是不是再也不会比古时候的好？
So can you say that again? Because
right, 就是说 modern-made silk string, does it no longer be able to be as good as the ancient time silk string?
So my method, I mean, Suxin Silk Strings, we use traditional method, which means that we at the same time, which means that so our one batch of strings is only 3 strings. So we are not industrially made process. The way we make the strings is actually similar to the way they make the guqin, just like one guqin and then another guqin. It's not about one large batch of the strings. So this is the difference between the the industrially made and the old ones. Well, actually, some people suspect that the quality of the original silk is different from the old. Yes, there are differences, but actually we can still find very good silk source. So it's possible. So that's why we made the Suxin Silk Strings. And so the very easy way to judge a string whether it is good or bad, well, it's just to look at its tension, because the larger tension it can hold, the better string it is. Actually, yeah.
And the smoothness, I found that Suxin is really smooth.
Yes. Okay. So this is I mean, to make the string smooth, what you need to apply very large tension, well, actually. But if the silk is fragile, then the string will break during the making process. Well, the smoothness comes from many parts. So the bigger tension is one of the. Well, actually, you can just put a towel and just like you can twist the towel. Well, if you pull the towel very much, and then the towel becomes smooth. So this is how it becomes smooth.
Are you still raising your own silk?
Raising?
I mean, sericulture. Are you?
Sericulture.
Yeah.
So, well, this is really interesting because every year, well, especially at the beginning of our manufacture, that was in 2014. 2014. So every year, the last sericulture site we went to close down. So every year we found a new one.
So you're not raising caterpillars anymore.
There are caterpillars, but and the thing is, those caterpillars were used as cloth making or something. They will require a lot of money for us to make them work. So which means that a small batch sericulture site was very hard to get. So I had to switch year by year. We are not raising our caterpillars, but we're looking for them year by year. Yeah.
So people have asked me that from time to time, do you not raise your own silk? And I always tell them, well, it requires a person who really knows how to do that. And often family tradition rather than something I can learn on my own.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, especially the first spooling machines. Well, the industrial spooling machine is very harmful to the silk, because it's good for making clothes, but it's not good for making clothes. Well, it's not good for making strings. The spooling machines. Yeah.
It took me several years to find a really good source of silk that was quality enough. I'm
right.
from Hangzhou now, and that's been very consistently good.
Oh, right, exactly. Well, I mean, every source we visited just closed down. So this year, I'm still looking for a new site.
About your glue mixture, on your site, it says that you use only Baiji, but I'm sure you use something else.
Right. Well, the thing is, the recipe for glue is made by Miss Suxin. I mean, the founder of the Suxin Silk Strings. Well, I didn't even know what's in the recipe. So what I know is, it was more than 20 kinds of Chinese medicine. Well, because she knows Chinese medicine, she make up that kind of recipe. In traditional silk string making, in the old books, it says Tianmendong and Beijing and sangshupi and fish glue, right? So this is a traditional four elements of the glue, of the silk glue. But Japanese is different. So the Japanese silk string was only rice, I think.
I have used rice paste from time to time, and I'm finding the fish glue is a lot more stable.
Right, exactly. Fish glue is, fish glue is, fish glue is, it's so expensive in China. Fish glue is very expensive, and there are different grades. Yeah, and fish glue can, some very expensive furniture, traditional Chinese furniture, they will use fish glue because it's it's easy to work with.
It's used in instrument making, musical instrument making too, because it's very easy to converse it. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, fish glue.
Is the high price of isinglass because of or luxury food industry in China? Because as you know, fish bladders are elite, expensive, premium food. Is that the problem?
That tradition comes from Chaoshan area, I think, in Guangdong. Well, because I went to several auctions and they sell fish glue on an auction, which is like several, how to say that, 好几十万啊，好几十万怎么说？ I mean,
many tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, right. Isn't for one piece of fish glue, and many people in Chaoshan area in Guangdong, they will place their dried fish glue in their closet. To show off to the guests. Yeah. Well, as an expensive food.
Can you give us some suggestion about playing on the silk string in the fingering technique? Is there any difference from playing the metal nylon string?
Okay, so suggestions on playing the silk strings is that so whatever the silk string brand is, the silk string is sticky. I think, more stickier than the metal nylon strings, which means that especially when you use the fourth finger on the silk string, on metal nylon strings, when you lift it up, the fourth finger, it does not make a sound. But I think when people are so used to metal nylon strings on the fourth finger on the silk string, it will generate a little noise. So to avoid the noise of the stickiness of the silk strings. So this is one thing I'd like to concern about the difference. And the other difference is that when switching, just like the thing I talk about Una, so when playing the chin pieces, pay attention to the tempo. Pay attention to the tempo of the piece. But because silk string decades shorter than the metal nylon strings. So when you want to make yourself comfortable, and people would play the piece faster actually on the silk strings compared to because on metal nylon strings the vibration lasts forever. So these are two things I think about the differences between the silk strings and metal strings.
那个 silk string 的阻力是不是比较大？左手 left hand 的那个阻力。
Well, the friction is, it's a good question. Well, because almost all of the people, when they first play the silk, it has very big friction. But after he got used to it, probably just 2 or 3 pieces, he will find out that it is smoother than the metal nylon strings, I think. Well, because the metal nylon string is nylon itself is a little, well, it's also a little sticky, I think. I mean, compared to the silk, which you, so the reason for that is that there are moisture and also some oil on your fingers, actually. So when the oil is applied to the silk, when the silk string is changed over time, so let's get smoother and smoother. So it's quite okay. I mean, the smooth surface for the silk strings, and the people do not need to use very big force. I mean, 不用很大的力, people to press the strings, which can help to relax when playing the silk string. So I think, yeah, so it's actually easier to play.
Yes.
I offer a dressing that you can wipe on the string that cleans it, and maybe I don't find that my strings are sticky, but
Okay.
it will actually improve the strings as it's used.
Okay. Yeah, well, to clean the strings, I mean, well, in China, well, especially in northern part of China, there are lots of dust, and the strings will get yellow color very soon. And well, and people, some of my clients, they like to clean the strings. Some of them even put them in the shower, not to let the water run through it, but to steam it. Well, I found that very, well, it's not very good, I think. Well, because the fish glue on it, the fish glue is very important to the tone of the string. Because the fish glue can dissolve in the water.
Yes, it would.
So if you steam it, and then the fish glue is gone.
So the lifespan for silk string can be how long?
That depends. That depends. So the silk string I'm playing was actually the 2014 string I played, and I mean, to play the string, there are several, how to say that, techniques. Several techniques needs to be considered. The first is that the right hand technique. Well, I noticed that some professional musician, not musician, some professional student from the music conservatory, when they play the metal nylon strings, they would use very big, 很大的力, the force on the strings, so their nails can cut the strings dramatically. But on silk strings, well, if you use the same kind of method, it will harm the strings. But that's okay, because well, if the fifth and the sixth and seventh strings got cut, well, you can always re-strum it. So there's this, and there's the second concern. Second concern is the left hand. The fourth string of the left hand is the qiaqi gesture. The qiaqi gesture. Some people, when they make this qiaqi gesture, he would pluck by his thumb very heavily. Yeah, so that will dramatically harm the strings in the middle, because if the strings break in the middle, there's no fix. So well, actually, a silk string can be played for a long time, and they're careful playing. So what I hope is that if the cost can go lower and then the price go lower, the things get better. So this is my hope.
I see.
People ask me how long the silk strings will last, and it really is dependent upon how you play and how often you play. If you play every day or play a couple times a week, it varies so much that I wouldn't be able to predict.
When I
Yeah.
started,
Right.
my teacher said strings are good for 7 years. I think he was talking about regular playing, that they're at their best after a couple of years and they start to deteriorate after 5. I think he was talking about old style rough strings. And after you play with them for a couple of years, then they become smooth. That's the only thing I can guess. I didn't even think to ask him about it, talking about old strings or just the strings that were available. The strings that were available in the 70s were very rough. And I remember spending a lot of time doing things like rubbing them with a cloth or something like this to try to make them smooth.
Right.
But there are people who say that the strings that you could get before the Taigu strings came out in 2000 were no good. People like Li Xiangting says he would play with silk strings if they were any good, but they were terrible. But
Okay.
they're not. They weren't. They're this. They have a very nice sound after you break them in.
There's a property in many cultures that say, oh, there's a golden age. In the old days, things were better. There's a tendency for people to think that way.
Yeah.
And
Well,
some cultures, they say old people are better too.
People were better in the past. Yeah. That's hard.
well, I remember well, they told me that in the 1950s there was a meeting in Central Music Conservatory. So New China was founded in 1949. So in the 50s, that Central Music Conservatory, they had a meeting about the revolution on the musical instrument, and Guan Pinghu made a larger qin, and that qin was put in the museum in Beijing actually, and then they switched silk strings to metal strings, not metal nylon strings, to metal strings, because metal nylon string was not there in the 50s. So that happens in the meeting. I mean, well, at least two chin players told me about that meeting. So at that time, new things are better. They think.
That's kind of the alternate of the golden age theory, is that
Right.
modern is better. The further we go, the better things will get. It's very linear.
Right.
Rather than cyclic.
Exactly. Right. And there's also an interesting story about who Chen Changlin told me. Chen Changlin told me the metal string they used are so easily to get rusted because of their finger moisture or something. So they didn't like to play chin about that, to play the iron strings. In the late 70s, they found out that the harp strings are actually metal nylon strings, and they looked up on internet. It says that metal nylon strings are invented in the 70s. So then the Guqin strings totally changed to metal nylons after 70s. Yeah.
I have a lot of people who play guitar who reach out to me to make silk strings for their guitars because they don't like the sound of the metal. So again, it goes full circle.
All right, exactly. And well, actually, it's probably the same as gut strings, because I know a guy who's enthusiast in a gut string. He told me the gut string situation is that there are Aquila strings. Aquila is a big brand, but the quality is very bad actually. Aquila gut strings. So there are some private gut string makers in Europe. They make really good gut strings, but well, if you search on internet, there are no information about them. They're just one-man workshop or two-man workshop, things like that.
It's hard to maintain a business without a certain flow. So you would have to make a lot of gut strings to make that work. Yes.
Right. And there's a news in China is that suddenly somebody told me that his relatives are researching on gut strings in Shandong. So maybe later, I mean, there will be some gut string made in China. Well, again.
What I've found with people who play gut strings, gut strings were the standard for guitar way up into the 1920s. It wasn't until the 50s that you got the pickups to play electric guitar, but they used the metal strings because they were louder and because they played large venues. Gut strings are really meant for small venues, small number of people, very similar to the way people play Guqin. It's not an instrument for a convention center. So there's a good trend toward gut strings again for classical instruments, and I find that silk strings are very close but different from gut strings, and that's kind of where I've done a lot of business.
Yes. So in the 2019, I visited Vienna, and this musician showed me the gut string made from the private workshop, and what I feel is that it's totally from the gut, from any other gut, because by the look of its appearance, it just look like nylon strings. It's very crystal clear, no texture on it, and straight, just look like nylon. But when he put it on the guitar, it's well, to me it sounds like it does not sound like a gut. Yeah. So I hope more people make guts.
You can make a lot of difference between one instrument and another as well.
Right. Yes.
Some Guqin don't do that well with silk strings because they're not made for that.
Right. Exactly.